And an advice I've gotten from my seniors a lot is don't rush to get promoted. Don't rush to climb the corporate ladder. You as a junior will have so much opportunity to learn, and you need to take advantage of it. A lot of the points are kind of the same over here, but this is why I wrote them again and again, to reiterate this point. Take advantage of you being a senior and junior. Take advantage of you being a junior. Take all the advantages you can in that area. And yeah, moving on. Some fundamental values and some good to knows, which I would have loved to know. So right before this presentation, like a week ago, I put out a survey in our company and be like, hey, seniors, everyone in the company, could you give me, do you want to tell a bunch of uni students / master's students, it's like, hey, what should they know before going into a consultancy? And here are kind of like the most important things I thought, and plus some of my own. Learn your client domain. What does that mean? This advice was from one of my mentors. When you go into a project, when you go into a client, you need to know the domain, you need to learn the domain, and you need to be an expert in the domain. That is the strive of being a good consultant. All right. Once you know their domain, you can advise them on what they should be really doing, how are they really struggling, like how you can improve their product. Ooh, I'm thirsty. Oops. All right. Mindset of a good consultant. Like I said, like I reiterated before, you as a consultant are being brought into a product, brought into a company or whatever you're working on for a particular reason. All right, something might be going wrong. They need to reach a deadline, or something's just not right. I said the same thing twice, but you get my point. And essentially that's why you're kind of there. You as a consultant are being brought into here to fix an issue, essentially. Consultants usually aren't brought into a project, you're like, oh, everything's all good. We just want more people to join our team for some reason. All right, as my fellow colleagues can agree. But essentially, yeah, when you join a product, you need to be like, okay, what's wrong with this product and how can I fix it? Where are the weak areas and how can I improve it? And what steps do I need to take to get to that goal? And yeah, that's generally the mindset I like to have, and yeah. Don't try to lone wolf everything. So this comes back to the point where take advantage of all the resources you have. You're not alone, all right? Especially a lot of you, if you do join a tech consultancy and whenever you join a company maybe for the first time, you're gonna be it comes back to the whole thing. It's like you're not the smartest person in the room. Take advantage of all the resources available to you. And don't try to lone wolf everything. Try to pair with your other engineers. Try to pair with your seniors, whether you're an engineer or not. So I'm gonna keep reiterating this point, but yeah, just take advantage of all the resources. Not every project will be aligned to your personal interest. So, I can see the smiles over here. Yeah, with this, being a consultancy, you're gonna tend to work in a lot of different type of clients. You're gonna tend to work in a lot of different type of products. And the fact of the matter is, not every project is gonna be your favorite project. Some of them sad truth is, some of them might be boring projects. But you as a consultant are being brought in there to fix something. Whether you want to take enjoyment of oh, okay, this is kind of like a puzzle I need to solve. What do I need to do? You can, go for it. But just a sad reality. I say sad reality. I should not say sad reality. It just is reality of our field that you're not going to enjoy every product. But sometimes you might do. So it's here or there. Don't get too attached to your project. At this point. So what does this mean? Sometimes clients leave. Sometimes the project ends. Sometimes stuff happens. And basically what I'm trying to say is, just like the previous point, you're going to be jumping project to project anyway as a consultant. And the fact of the matter is, you should not get too attached. I did say, be an expert in the domain. That at that point, I'm not going to take back. You should know your domain really well. You should know like the space you're working in, but don't get too attached to the point where when you were moved on, you suddenly just feel like, I don't want to work anymore, or I'm losing the motivation. Just a thing to know in your mind when you're like working in a tech consultancy. Learning what to say at the right time. So, this I learned being a fresh graduate in my first 3 months. Essentially, I'm not gonna say what client, because I don't want to be flamed right after this. So, it was my very first project, and it was my very first client, and we were kind of like in a big team meeting and everyone, and we were all introducing ourselves. And then my turn came, and I told them, hey, I'm Zill. I'm a fresh graduate from Univo. Don't do that. Why? Because, think about it, you as a consultant are getting, you're being charged at pretty high rates, especially as a tech consultant to these other companies, and you're telling these clients, it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna throw a fresh graduate to your hands, here you go, and you're paying this and this much. It not only brings a kind of not a bad image per se, but a certain image to not only yourself, but to the company you're also working for. And not to say that you don't have the skills of someone really good, and definitely not that. It's more just the image that you are bringing upon yourself, whether you want people to take yourself seriously. I mean, if you're gonna go to a really big company where people have tens and 20 years of experiences, and you're like, hey, I'm a fresh graduate who's gonna fix your stuff. I mean, kind of think about it, right? So I guess that's the kind of the point I'm making. It's you gotta be careful what you say, especially just who you're saying it to and what you're saying it to, and stuff I would have loved to know. This was one of my first reviews. Is hey, be careful, Zill, what you say. And client management. This kind of reiterates the first point I was trying to say as well. Remember, when you go on to another project, you are representing your company, right? And whatever decision you make and whatever things you say, you are representing that company. Whatever I say here today is basically representing Lexicon as a company. Essentially, that's kind of my point, right? You don't want to say something stupid. And the thing with this is basically when you show an image about yourself to other companies and to other clients, they have that image set for you and be like, okay, you did something good, this is what you said, I actually want to keep this person on, so I'm gonna renew his or her contract, I'm gonna keep them continuing. Essentially, that's the thing I'm trying to say. And this not only comes to you, but your company as well. Do I still want Lexicon to continue working with me? Do I still want them as in this product company? That's essentially the thing I'm trying to say. But that's kind of basically the main values I kind of wanted to talk about. And with that, that's pretty much it. I was like, ooh. So, before I get to the hoodie competition thing, we'll have a short Q&A, essentially. How would you like to just ask them? Or how do you want to do the Q&A? Alright, we'll have a 5-minute Q&A. If anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hands. We can talk, yeah, so go for it.
I understand right now that you are a consultancy company, but what kind of project are you doing? What line of industry? And how engaged you are? What's the average one of the project?
So Lexicon specifically is a tech consultancy. We focus on building and upbringing software, and we're essentially a bunch of nerds and engineers who are companies basically reach out to us, and we reach out to other companies where they are struggling in the tech space, and whether it's specifically mobile apps or if it's web apps or cloud infrastructure, and that's where our expertise come into play. We are there to build products and software, and that's essentially kind of it. In terms of the second part of your question, how long our engagements are, it really depends on client to client. If a client just wants a product to be built, we're there for them. We have kind of 3 sides for our company right now, where we bring up a certain product from stage 0 to stage N, or we come in between where they already have a product and we okay, we'll come in and help betterment your product or improve your product. So that's the space Lexicon kind of works at, essentially. And how long depends. In terms of me specifically, Lexicon has this kind of thing where we kind of want yearly rotations. So every year we try to rotate all of our engineers, all of our BAs, all of our delivery people once a year to a different project or a different client altogether. So hopefully that answered your question. Cool. Any other question? Any other thing? Yes.
What was your biggest challenge rolling onto your first client, and how did you overcome that?
Oh, my biggest challenge, so I think definitely the biggest challenge was the whole mentality of a consultant. Like I said, I was a fresh grad, and I think in week 2 I was rolled onto a client, and I was a bit afraid. It was okay, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do over here. It's obviously I was giving guidance, and I was had senior engineers and senior delivery people guiding me throughout, but it was a lot of imposter syndrome going on. And I think the main challenge for me was getting over that imposter syndrome, where it's hey, okay, yeah, I as time went on, I could tell it's okay, my knowledge is actually valuable, and I'm bringing some value to this company, whether it's my engineering skills, whether it's my consultant skills and stuff like that. So I think as time went on, it was more conquering that fear of okay, I'm not an imposter. I worked my way to come here. I deserve a spot to be here. So I think that is definitely a thing I think a lot of people face, especially in the tech industry, just being not believing in yourself. So I reckon that was the biggest hurdle for me. So yeah, and if there's not one more question, yes, Chris.
Hi, Zill.
Hi, Chris.
How did you come across Lexicon, and what made you want to apply?
Not gonna lie, connections. I'll be honest, it was events like these essentially that kind of connected me to people who were in Lexicon, and that's how I got a job. So you lot making the first step to actually attending these type of events, whatever year you're in, year 1, year 2, or your last year, it kind of shows effort on your end as well. You're okay, yeah, the motivation, you can see the motivation from people coming here to these type of events. Okay, these are the type of people who I would actually like to work with. So yeah, to answer your question, it was it was one of these type of events. It was oh, I met someone from Lexicon. It was and I was in my last semester, and that's when I was getting that job application rush. So yeah, that's essentially how I kind of ended up in Lexicon. Ooh, okay, go for it.
I'm just curious, relative to other tech consultancies, what would you say Lexicon has that, others don't?
Not to sound a bit, well, we have a Switch. We play a lot of Smash Bros. If that's something, but not to sound so full of ourselves, but I do personally believe this. We might be going over time with question and answers, I'm sorry. But we might, this might sound too full of ourselves, but I do genuinely actually believe this. Lexicon has a lot of smart people, a lot of smart engineers, and a lot of smart delivery people. And I think the thing we bring upon is obviously when you compare us to one of the really big companies that have been there for 30, 40 years, we might be just I think it's year 6, right? Yeah, we're year 6 into our company. But I think we have this proven track record. It's we can bring you quality software with quality people, and I think that's what Lexicon just brings to what services to other companies. I did see. Okay, well, last question, and then yeah.
Accepting her
Yes, I'm an international student.
Hi guys, I'm Amanda, and today, thank you, hi. I will be presenting a little presentation that I have today. So it's called Bridging the Gap, Life as a BA. So there's some misconceptions around like in tech that you need to learn how to code. So a lot of times I get a lot of like people asking like, oh, if I want to get into tech, what kind of languages should I learn? Should I learn Python? What's the best thing to like really get into, right? So I'm sure that some of you can relate as well. And what I realised that throughout my time in university studying an IT degree, I've done my fair share of like programming units as well. And what I realised, I was like, oh, maybe programming isn't really my thing. Like I couldn't really imagine myself like kind of doing it day in and day out. And what I really found was that there are actually more roles in there other than a developer that I could really get into. So I know that in Zill's presentation, he did a little survey of you guys, and I think that a lot of you are like business information students as well. So I'm like, I hope that you guys feel the same thing. Like maybe I'll just gauge the room. Like put your hands up if you kind of feel the same way as well. Like you want to get into tech, but then you're not too interested in programming, but you can do it. Yeah. Oh, okay, I see some. Okay, sure. So I saw some hands there. So I'm like, if you are interested in that, like if you have your hands up, then I think that, yeah, this presentation is for you. So moving on. A little bit about me. So I am a senior consultant at Lexicon. So I did a Bachelor's of Business Information Systems at Monash back in 2017. So a little over 5 years of experience in consulting. So before joining Lexicon last year, I was at Deloitte in digital as well. And anything you can talk about, you can talk to me about like agile delivery, any like kind of career development as well. And then if you're not really into any of those things, it's like baking and bouldering, I'm really into too. So I've just started bouldering like 3 months ago. So if you have any tips for me, like let me know as well.
So sorry.
Cool. Prize alert as well. So a Lexicon hoodie will be given out at the end to my favourite question after the end of the presentation as well. So if you have any like insightful or funny questions that you have for me, feel free and I'll choose one person. So it's a lot more simple than Zill's, but then I hope that's a bit more straightforward. No, I'm saying that it's really good and then mine's just
I'm being called out.
I'm not dissing you.
Sure.
So why do we need business analysts in the first place? So the first area that we're like kind of really delving into is around businesses need to evolve to stay competitive. So some of the ways that they can achieve this is like keeping up to date with industry trends, learning more about their customers, and also like differentiating themselves from the market as well. And there's lots of different ways that companies can do this, but then one of the ways that companies are kind of gravitating towards these days are investing into digital solutions. So this is where we come in, right? So a lot of times they use this to kind of solve business needs, also improve customer experiences, and also like encouraging innovation within the company as well. So kind of getting into like in a digital project, we kind of have two main areas for digital change. So a lot of times that there can be lots of different parties that come together into a digital project, but then we can essentially kind of drill them, like kind of put them down to two main areas. So the first one is around the business, where they kind of identify the business needs, and a lot of them are like kind of subject matter experts as well. So they do these things like day in and day out and really have deep understanding of like and knowledge of what they really want to get out of. And the second part is around technology as well. So these will be like more of like the IT kind of delivery people like us, where we come in and help and implement the solution as well. And in the ideal world, you just have these two kind of parties here. But what happens is that they're actually much further than we think. So what happens is that some of the issues in business is that they're unable to communicate the requirements to achieve the needs like technically, And at the same time, in technology, developers, it takes a lot of time to understand requirements in detail, and that really takes a lot of time off of what they could be doing and focusing on really quality work as well. And what happens is that it essentially creates a gap. And the question is that how do we fill in the gap? And of course, the answer is business analysts. So we're essentially the bridge that kind of covers between business and technology as well. So what we're going to go through is just kind of talking through a little bit about what we do, and then our roles and responsibilities afterwards, and we'll give you a little of a case study as well. So what do BAs typically do? So one of the areas is around identifying problems and improvement opportunities like in the business processes. So a lot of times that businesses will come to us, and then we will kind of really work together in terms of understanding what their needs are. And that could be workshops or interviews as well. And the second one we have is around breaking down the requirements into tasks, and then we kind of deliver them to our developers as well. So what happens is that after when we identify these problems, we create requirements to say what is the work that we actually need to do? And to be able to do that is a skill in itself, where you have to kind of document and make sure that a lot of the work is kind of cleanly kind of packaged in a way so the developers understand what needs to be done. And finally, we want to ensure that the delivered product fits the needs of our end users as well. Because since we're so close to the business, along the way, we start to understand what the business really needs. And of course, since we write the requirements as well, at times when the product is delivered, we'll also want to make sure that it kind of meets our stakeholders' needs before it kind of goes through into production. So we're kind of there as an in-between to just kind of make sure that the quality is there, and we have we're making sure that the product that we're sending out is tip-top. So a little case study, I want to kind of show you more of kind of what the BA would do in each of these kind of delivery kind of cycles that we have. So a local restaurant is looking to create a new ordering experience for their customers through a mobile application. So I'm going to be following the kind of the Lexicon delivery framework that we have, and it comes in 3 phases. So we've got discovery, delivery, and then afterwards release and continuous improvement. So I'm these are just the phases that we have out here, but then what I'll do is I'll step through it one by one in terms of what a typical BA would be involved in kind of working through these. So the first one is discovery. So what happens in discovery is that us BAs will be working very closely with our stakeholders to understand what features that they'll like to see in the application. So a lot of this will be just kind of wanting to create alignment and wanting to get to know our stakeholders as well. And from this, some of the activities that would happen throughout this process would be conducting workshops. So for example, we'll have for the restaurant, restaurateurs that we wanted to kind of get together and also understand what are the goals that we really want to achieve. And what are the kind of requirements, what do you want to see on this application as well. And then we're trying to go as kind of blue sky as possible, just trying to make sure that we've kind of captured everything and getting everybody's input to make sure that this ordering application is the best it can possibly be. So another one could be market research and user feedback as well. So one of the things that we'll kind of go through as BAs is to kind of look out what is the competition out there. Have you guys heard of Mr. Yum, where you're kind of ordering the ordering the food from the application, testing that, seeing how that works too. And it's what are the kind of features that we think are really great that we can also incorporate in our application as well. And then user feedback, that could also kind of assist surveys that you can reach out. You can ask them questions what's something that you really want to see from this ordering app. And what happens is that after when you gather all this information up, you can help assist in producing a problem statement. So this could be a page in terms of what are the problems that we're really wanting to solve. Success measures. So this is around kind of metrics and goals that our application will like want to achieve. So at the end of the day, we will like to kind of revisit back to say that have we really like kind of achieved these goals? And this is usually kind of used to measure and kind of answer the question of like, has our application been successful? Another one is the as is and to be customer journey map. So a lot of times it's like we want to kind of draw out the customer journey of like what the users are currently going through in terms of ordering food. So it's like they go into the restaurant, they order, they have to wait for a little bit, and if they want to take away, they kind of like, yeah, bring it back. But then what's like the to be though? And the thing is that once you draw that out, the current state, it kind of gives you a little bit more insight in terms of like what are the gaps, what are the different opportunities that we can help like our client in terms of improving their processes. What will like make things special for our customers so they can like come back and order our food again. And finally, we've got to prioritize user story map. So once you understand like what the requirements are from gathering like from your workshops and your market research and your surveys, and then what will happen is that you'll start to draw out what are the different things or what are the different features that you would like to see in your application as well. So this is what happens when we've kind of gotten a set of like critical features out that we think that's a working product and we can release that to the public. So what happens is that the core features are created, then I'm just repeating what I've said before, but then the work actually doesn't end here. So there's still lots of things to do, and which includes like using analytics to gauge like app usage. So a lot of times, like once the app is out there, we want to make sure that our users are using it, how they're interacting with it. Are there bugs? Are there any crashes? What's like the most popular like kind of feature that they're using at the moment? And like kind of gathering that information really sets us to like kind of prioritize what we really need to work on. Other thing is around like collecting user feedback and monitoring reviews as well. So it's really similar to the analytics in terms of like kind of sending out surveys or asking like, oh, would you like to rate our app? Like, can you give us some comments how we're doing? And I think that really kind of builds into us understanding how we can really make our app better. Yeah, and then that kind of leads into identifying improvement opportunities as well. So once you have all that information there, now you're trying to assess what's the feature that is most in demand. Like what should we be kind of focusing on first? And then after creating like some requirements, then what you'll have to do is like prioritize like the upcoming development work as well. So like kind of creating a new set of requirements to like kind of give to the developers to continually improve your product. So as being a BA for 5 years, I just wanted to kind of give you some tips in terms of like if you do decide to become one, how to become a great BA as well. And there's a few things that kind of differentiate from being a good BA to like a great BA. And I kind of sum it down to like 3 things. So the first one is like developing a toolbox of methods. So being able to kind of over time, you kind of pick up different methods and frameworks that you can really like implement in your kind of delivery cycle. So just not being complacent on just doing the same thing over and over again. Like if you have a particular like kind of framework that you use, for example, you're not expected to like for every different project you just use the same thing. Like don't be afraid. I think at this point, like one of the best things about a BA is like being able to experiment a lot of things as well, being able to try out with a new project team, because at the end of the day it's like everybody's learning, right? So I think that just kind of building up a variety of ways to like tackle a problem, that's really, really useful. And like the more that you kind of have different like kind of ways of like approaching one thing, you'll realize that there's like pros and cons as well. So sometimes for one situation there's like a better way to do it and maybe another one's not so much. And then once you kind of experiment and learn, then you kind of have an idea in terms of like what you think would be really like great to implement in your discoveries versus what's not so much. The second one is like the ability to influence the shape of the solution as well. So since like you're a BA, you're like a keeper of requirements. And a lot of times when you're first like kind of starting out as a BA, you're talking to your stakeholders, and what is so easy for you to kind of get into is just like writing down and documenting anything that your like kind of stakeholders say. And I think that that's not, while that's kind of great at the start for like documenting and just putting everything by verbatim, but then what really kind of provides value like to the company is that you can do a lot more by influencing, like asking the right questions. Like, so sometimes a lot of like our stakeholders, they don't really know what they want. And a lot of times it's like they may be wrong. And when they say requirement, you just can't take it as it is. You have to like make sure that you have some like kind of questions and making sure that this is really right, and really kind of reflecting back on like the problem statements that you've developed in your discoveries as well. And another thing is around resolving conflicts and ambiguities. So especially in like a very big project where you have lots and lots of stakeholders, there's going to be times when your stakeholders will have different opinions, and that can clash. And a lot of times that will also create tension as well. And what happens is that as a BA, you'll have to kind of step in and just remind them in terms of like why they're really there, and also kind of give some like, just insight to where your opinions lie, and then maybe something around like, oh, maybe we'll have another discussion to really work through them as well. And then finally, we really want to ensure that the business is like, or needs what, like the product, at the end of the product, that's something that the business really needs. Apologies. And I think that, just making sure that you're always like kind of thinking back to the end goal of what you want the product to be, and making sure that always constantly checking in with like the stakeholders to kind of see that, if they're okay, and then if they're happy with the direction of the project as well. Finally, being flexible. So the role of the BA is literally never the same. So there's always going to be projects where you do one thing, and then when you come into a new project, you kind of expect doing the same thing. However, it's really not. Every project's very unique, right? Because when you come into like kind of teams and you're working with business and you're working with like tech as well, there's different levels of like kind of understanding of the project in itself. So one thing would be around if the business has maybe a little bit more technical knowledge. Maybe our developers have been working in this kind of product space like once upon a time, and they have a lot of business knowledge about that too. So it's like being able to like really understand both sides and adapting to the needs as well. So after when you've kind of like assessed like your kind of stakeholder group, that is where you can kind of recognize what are the gaps, what do they really need.
What's the most rewarding aspect of being a BA?
Sorry?
What's the most rewarding aspect of being a BA?
Wording?
Rewarding.
Oh, rewarding aspect. Ideas. So I think what's one of the most rewarding things in like from my personal experience is like you don't really, while like you're not like kind of working on code, I'm not like developing on things, but in a way that you're like helping influence shape that actual outcome as well. And what I really like is especially like if it's like a mobile app or something that you can really touch, and if it's for like a client where like it really makes an impact as well. So where you know that you're going to be helping end users. So for example, like when I was working back in government as well, we were making something that would really like kind of impact everyday Victorians. And I think that afterwards when we had like the application up and using it, and I could kind of put myself like with like the user and like actually saying that, oh my God, I can really benefit something like this. That's really rewarding because I know that I play like a major part in writing those requirements and really like influencing in the shape of like how like the features look like, how the best user experience works like, because we're working with both like devs, UXs, like the leads as well as business. So it's like you're kind of really bringing everybody together to actually push through a project. So yeah, I think that's one that's really close to my heart. Yes? I'm best.
Just a quick question. So if you're, say hypothetically, if you're recruiting right now, I know you said that there are flexibility is the most valuable quality you're looking for, but like for new grad, we don't necessarily have that. So if you're recruiting right now, what would you say is like the most valuable quality that you're looking for in like the new, like, and I hope you're like not noticing, I'm just trying to get you to answer like the interview questions that we're potentially gonna get in like interviews.
What's a really great thing about consulting is that once you come in as a fresh graduate, we don't really expect you to know a lot of things. A lot of the times, like being a BA, being a developer, you do have core skills, but then at the same time you have a lot of like mentors around you, and you're also working like and learning on the job as well. So one of the core, like a few of the core qualities that we really look into is around like having that drive and having that knowledge of wanting to like improve yourself and learn more as well. So I think that like being really receptive to feedback, always asking for feedback as well. And one way I think is also taking initiative. So always like kind of asking other people like, hey, how can I help out? Like, what are like things that I can really like kind of make an impact in this company too? And I think that like you don't need to have like all these like kind of technical skills or like the BA knowledge to be able like to have that as well. Like you can start from the ground up. And I think that that's during the interviews, that's something that a lot of like us interviewers like kind of really look for as well. Yeah. Yes.
Curious how you guys interact with BA's interactive programmers.
Yeah.
And how do you ensure like whatever message you're trying to get across actually gets across?
Yeah, for sure. How we interact with developers is that because we're essentially like that bridge, right? Like kind of constantly like kind of iterating that, is that because you have like some like kind of technical knowledge as well, and you also have business knowledge. So one of the core skills that you need to have is that being able to kind of communicate like in the right way, the right manner to your audience. So while you're kind of making sure that like you're not using like as much technical jargon for businesses, but then once you kind of do talk to developers, you'll also be expected to know a little bit of technical knowledge as well while not coding, but then you have to like kind of understand like the interactions between like how one thing works with another and being able to communicate with the developers as well. So I think that, yeah, as long as like, I'm sure that both sides, both BAs and tech, like we're very patient with each other, but then after a while when you get into like a project, you also find your groove as well. And I'm sure that like tech, like your developers are very understanding in terms of like our like kind of our knowledge too, and they also make up a lot of that as well. So if we don't understand something technically, a lot of times that we also bring them to like our like discussions as well, and they can also help like kind of cover some of our like kind of understandings or misunderstandings of like technology too. So it's like being able to understand what you're good at and what you're not so good at, and then also getting the right people to be able to discuss that too. Yeah. Cool. Did I answer the question? Or
No, that's perfect. Thank
awesome.
you.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Yes.
I do have a question regarding your case study that you just used as an example. During the initiation stage, when you were trying to gather the requirements from your clients, how do you know it's not really beneficial for the clients? What's the standard?
Yeah. So one of the core things that we have in our Lexicon framework is that, unfortunately, I don't have the diagram for you, but then our first stage, there's like a decision tree at the end, and it says that, is this something that we should be able to like go on with? Is it substantial enough for us to kind of move on to the next stage or not? And a lot of times it's like, especially in some like kind of projects where a lot of it is like kind of bleeding edge or like there's new innovation coming through, there's a higher risk of failure as well. So kind of going through the discovery phase and really trying to do research and seeing if it's even feasible in the first place. I think that just kind of at that stop, when you finish your discovery, that's when you really ask your question. And then if it's not, if you feel like your kind of clients or you feel like there's not really going anywhere, that's when it's like a good conclusion, and you can just document and wrap things up and just say that, wow, I'm really glad that I tried discovering this. There's other times where it's like, oh, not too sure whether or not there's like there's still some risk there, but still unsure. That's where like a lot of times we kind of do proof of concepts. So it's like we don't go all the way in to develop something, but then we develop like a small part of it just to see whether or not there's like more kind of client uptake for it too. So there's lots of different ways, but then we usually stop there.
I understand what you're saying. You're trying to say it's like agile kind of methodology that you guide from your project. But I still have the question on the integration. Is there any qualitative or quantitative standard or index or data that you use to guide whether it's a good requirements or it's the client just wants utopia, they're inside of utopia, imagine something that will fix their problem? How do you distinguish that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because, yes, as you said before, a lot of how we kind of run our discoveries is based on user research as well. So we need to make sure that a lot of like each step that we go is backed by how many are users actually using the app? Are users interacting with it? Or people don't really care? Is there any kind of surveys that we can really kind of understand as well, like we get from our customers? And then what do they say about that too? So I think that there's not really one kind of defining data kind of point where we really kind of say if that's a good project to go on or not. It's more of kind of just looking at the wider circle of different inputs and really trying to answer how does that answer each of the questions, and then as a whole, is that something that we want to go forward with? So I hope I answered your question right.
Totally.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much.